The NBA trade deadline has passed and teams are fully focused on the NBA playoff race, but that has not stopped the Sixers from making some moves. Following an impressive win over the Charlotte Hornets, one that this team desperately needed last night, we got the news that the Sixers had waived Kenny Lofton Jr., according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. So not a huge surprise here. I've been a guy that's spoken very highly of Kenny Lofton Jr. in the past and still am a fan of his game, but I do understand the limitations that he has and really the struggle to find a full role with this Sixers team. My ears started to perk up about the lack of momentum as far as Kenny Lofton's future outlook with the Sixers when you start to see these opportunities being created for guys like Ricky Council IV and Terquavion Smith, the other guys on two-way contracts in the Sixers organization, while Kenny Lofton Jr. was essentially stuck down in Delaware throughout the process. And if this was not the time to give him an opportunity with all the injuries that the team currently has to Joel Embiid, to Mo Bamba at times, DeAnthony Melton, Robert Covington, there's been a ton of guys banged up during the stretch, and the fact that Lofton did not receive an NBA opportunity with the Sixers pretty much was pretty indicative of what his future could be to me. I do want to shout him out for his production in the G League, that in the 11 regular season games that he did play down in Delaware, 29.8 minutes per game, 26.4 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, 4.0 steals, or 4.0 assists, 1.6 blocks, which is pretty impressive. Shot just 30.8% from three, but up that volume to 3.5 per game. Also shot 55.1% from the field overall. He was a really solid player down there, and I will say I got a chance to catch him live and in person twice down there, that there is a basketball feel that is tough to quantify that you can really feel in his game. The playmaking specifically jumped out, far more impressive from what those 4 assists per games indicate, that there were many times where the Bluecoats fully played through Kenny Lofton Jr., that he was the absolute hub of that offense. But what that also brings as an issue when looking forward to his potential role is he's not going to get quite that type of opportunity at the NBA level. That when you look at how NBA teams are constructed, you very clearly have your stars, the primary decision makers, the guys that you build around, the Joel Embiids, the Tyrese Maxeys, and then everyone else has to find their little niche about them. I think Kenny Lofton struggles to make an impact in the margin with kind of the hustle areas, stuff like rebounding the ball, getting high-level decisions. He's a guy that needs to be a high usage player, and that is a struggle when you're trying to make that leap and be a little bit of this in-between talent between the G League and the NBA. I still have a lot of belief in his game. He's also lost a ton of weight down in the G League. I do want to tip my hat to that I would guess he's probably down at least 50 pounds since when he first showed up to camp. He reportedly weighed over 300 at a point in time. I would guess he's well below 250. It's notable when you see him, and I know I did a couple of side-to-side pictures that I tweeted out a while ago that you can see the drastic difference from the Kenny Lofton that is kind of in our brains and the guy that he is now. But it did not take long for the Sixers to fill that roster spot, as this morning we got the news that the Sixers are signing guard Jeff Dowtin Jr. to a two-way NBA deal out of the first-place Delaware Bluecoats affiliate. Sources tell The Athletic and The Stadium. This coming from Shams Charania. Dowtin, who played for Nick Nurse in Toronto, has averaged 21.4 points and 7 assists in the last 12 G League games. So I think that Nick Nurse connection is specifically important to mention here. We're starting to see some Nick Nurse influence on this roster, that there's always some give and take between the general manager and the coach for what the roster can be constructed on. I know we've nitpicked and talked in a great depth of frustration about some of these Doc Rivers decisions, rolling with a guy like DeAndre Jordan over a player like Paul Reed, but we're starting to see who some of Nick Nurse's guys are. That is why Kyle Lowry is here as the backup point guard. Kyle Lowry coming off a 15-point and 10-assist performance, who was very effective in that last game against the Hornets, and the Sixers needed every bit of it. And Jeff Dowtin is another example of a guy that Nick Nurse seems to like. To kind of shout out some of his stats, I'll begin at the NBA level, that he has gotten a little bit more of an opportunity, still just 25 years old. That through his career, not much of a chance, but he did play 25 games with the Raptors last year, played 10.4 minutes per game in that, just 2.4 points, 1.2 assists. This isn't something that you're going to be able to run to the stat sheet and brag about, but I do think it is worth noting that he's at least been in that NBA mix a little bit more than a lot of the players we're having in this. And as far as the G League numbers for Dowtin, he does shine a little bit. That looking at his numbers this year in Delaware, he's played 16 games for the Bluecoats, started in 14 of them. In 32.1 minutes per game, he's averaging 18.1 points, 5.6 assists, 3.1 rebounds, 1.1 steal, shooting 38.4% from three on 5.4 attempts per game, which is a little bit down from his career average of 41.4%. If he can shoot at that level of volume and efficiency at the NBA level, there could possibly be a role for Jeff Dowtin Jr. I'm not fully bought in and committed to that, and I'll say this for Dowtin specifically, that he is a guy that has underwhelmed my eye test a little bit, that in the moments that I have locked in and watched him, and I don't watch every single Bluecoats game, so maybe I'm just catching him on the bad bad games. I don't want to crucify the guy just yet, but he hasn't been a guy that has stood out as far as a talent to me. And as far as the Sixers from a roster construction standpoint, it is interesting to me that they made this move. That now the 3 two-way spots are fully operated by Ricky Council IV, Terquavion Smith, and Jeff Dowtin Jr. So 3 guards that they're rolling with there. Ricky, I guess, is a little bit of a forward, but he's still only like 6'4", maybe 6'6" on a really good day. That he's not a guy that's going to be, playing forward minutes, even though in the way he kind of has in some of these small ball lineups. It is interesting to me that there are primarily guards. Obviously, I think this is way more indicative of them not seeing a future for Kenny Lofton Jr. and them giving Jeff Dowtin a chance for it. And the other aspect of things that I do think is weighing on the Sixers team is De'Anthony Melton. That we got the update yesterday that Nick Nurse said De'Anthony Melton is out and they do not know for how long. Now we know with Melton that he's been battling back issues for the better part of 2 years now, that he missed 18 consecutive games dating back to before the All-Star break, ultimately did return to the floor but played just 3 games and was pulled out after 8 minutes against that Boston Celtics team because he re-injured that back. Back injuries are a tough thing to battle back from, and there's something that impact every area of life. This is not something that De'Anthony Melton just kind of tough out and play through, that he's going to feel it every step he takes, every movement, every cut, even in your day-to-day life. The stuff of literally walking around sounds like it's a little tough on Melton right now, and as far as the outlook from the Sixers perspective, feeling pretty pessimistic about a potential return. I am hopeful that De'Anthony Melton does come back to the Sixers team. He has proven himself as a valuable part of the team, developed into quite the impressive player when you think about the combination of his willingness as a three-point shooter, his defensive ability, the way that he can get in passing lanes. And that is especially important when looking at the Sixers team the way that it is constructed, that they do need a little bit of that defensive emphasis that he does bring to the table. Melton has had some really nice flashes guarding some tough competition, even guys a little above his size. That Melton, while he is 6'2", does have a 6'9" wingspan, and he uses every inch of that to cause issues on opponents. You feel it in the steals that he's able to pick up. And if he's not able to return to the Sixers team this year, or at least for the foreseeable future, that's a huge gap to fill. Now, Jeff Dowtin is not a guy that possesses quite the defensive stuff that De'Anthony Melton. He's only 6'3", Jeff Dowtin, so about the same size without the freakish wingspan, and he's okay defensively. He's not a guy that I think needs to be covered up for in the way that some small guards are, but he's not a guy that I think is next in line as this defensive stopper for the Sixers organization. But when you speak about the long-term view of the Sixers team, I am grateful that they're taking the two-way slots a little more seriously this year, it seems. That in past years, they've either even it felt like just kind of kept guys around just to keep guys around rather than searching for guys that could have a long-term impact. It feels like this year that they're constantly focused on whether that is the opportunity, whether that's the guy. And we've even seen opportunities like Darius Bazley getting a 10-day contract, or Kenny Lofton was a guy who came in shortly after the season. They actually traded for Kenny Lofton at the G League level, which I didn't even fully know was possible until it happened with this situation. But it's clear that they're focused on upgrading and creating this pipeline from young player to legitimate contributor. And that is an area in the Sixers organization that I think has been drastically looked over for years past. That when you look at really good NBA organizations, the pipeline that they're able to create as far as you draft a guy, you put a little on his plate, you develop him, and then that guy turns into either an effective role player or a guy that you can trade for something. That even if it's a situation like Jaden Springer is not the best example, but flipping him for a second-round pick, I would consider that a loss because he was obviously the 28th overall pick and a guy they took in the first round. But if you're having the same type of process with guys like Terquavion Smith, Ricky Council IV, who are each undrafted free agents, you see the way that kind of does move up the ladder a little bit. Now, I'm not saying I want either of those guys traded. Frankly, I'm very interested in both of their long-term abilities. And Ricky Council is a guy specifically that I want signed to an NBA contract today, that I think that should have happened already. And the last part that I want to note about this entire roster construction conversation is we are now past the point where players added can be eligible for the NBA postseason. So who the Sixers have on roster is who they're going to get come playoff time. I believe my one side note that I'll make on that is players currently available and currently free agents. I know Shake Melton was a guy that was bought out right before the buzzer, I believe can be added and still be eligible for the playoffs, but everyone that is currently on a roster will be stuck with their teams, or even if there is a buyout situation, they will not be eligible to sign with the Sixers team. So They still have a little bit of roster availability, that bottom end of the roster, the Darius Bazley 10-day contract has worn out, that there are 2 open roster spots, but it would not surprise me if they're in the position of looking for long-term options, of seeking some of these guys that, let's say they convert Ricky Council to a standard NBA deal, as I hope to be the case, and as signs are trending towards that being the case, that leaves them with 1 open 2-way slot and 1 open NBA roster spot. So they still have to fill those to some extent. I don't think in either direction those are guys that can contribute in a playoff setting, but that is 2 swings at the plate that you can get looking for long-term prospects that could be an asset to the Sixers team. Maybe get a little guy a little further in his situation or growth in the NBA for that full roster spot, and take another chance on a 2-way guy. Maybe Kenny Lofton Jr. could even coming back for that particular role. I'm not taking that fully off the table. But ultimately, we do have to rest easy knowing that there is no more Kenny Lofton. Shout out to him, the massive human being that he has been as a little play in this title here. But grateful for the minutes that he did spend with the Delaware Bluecoats. Excited to see what Jeff Dowtin can bring. See if he does get an NBA chance whatsoever. If he does, I would say that's a pretty strong praise and shows a lot about what Nick Nurse believes in him or thinks of him. So let's keep that on the table, and let's see how the Sixers team goes from here. They will be back in action tomorrow against the Dallas Mavericks. Another game that they could use a win, but it's going to be a much tougher matchup than that Charlotte Hornets game. So let me know what your guys' predictions are for that matchup in the comments. Also, any thoughts on Kenny Lofton Jr. or Jeff Dowtin Jr.? Maybe I'm sleeping on Jeff Dowtin. Let me know if you think I am in the comments. Give me your top takes on that. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button to keep this Sixers Digest family growing. Drop a like, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.